this is Jackie Williams, and in this video I want to share with you some great tips for heat embossing successfully. Now the tools you need to have are embossing powder, and I have white here. Now optional is to have this really great tray with the funnel at the end so you can put it back in your container. Also you'll need a heat tool. Also optional but extremely useful is this Emboss Buddy, which just takes away any static or wetness that might be on your paper before you start, and I'll show you a demonstration of that. And then also optional but very handy is a little brush to brush away any excess powder, and a pair of reverse tweezers that have an end that doesn't heat up the rest of the tweezers. So as I hold this isn't getting hot and transferring to my fingers. So that is optional but very helpful to have. And then of course you need some images and cardstock, as well as Versamark ink or some other sticky ink, one that doesn't dry right away, because you need something for the powder to stick to. Now let's just jump right in and do some heat embossing. So I have cut a square here out of basic black, and I have used the largest square out of the Stylish Shapes die set. And the first thing I'm going to do is rub over my paper with the Emboss Buddy. And you could tap it like this. And it might leave a little bit of a residue, but we'll take care of that later. Now that removes then any oils from my hands, anything wet that might already be there. For example, if you had stamped in water-based ink first already, and then we're gonna emboss on top, you wanna make sure that that other ink is completely dry and there's nothing there that is sticky or the powder will stick to. Then we're going to stamp our words, and I'm going to use the Kindest Expressions. I'm going to use that "Oh Happy Day." Ink that up with my Versamark. So another tip is you want to make sure that your Versamark is very wet. If you have an old one, you might need to get a refill and refill that up, or get a new one, because you want to have quite a lot of ink on there so that your powder will stick nicely to it. Okay, then you're just going to dip it in the powder. I like to do it like this. Some people prefer to use a spoon. I just don't like gritty things on my hand. Now that is pretty good, but if by chance you had some stray powder, you would use the little brush and just brush those away. And then you could hold it with your reverse tweezers. And normally I would edit out the heat embossing part because the noise is quite obnoxious, but I do want to show you a few more tips on heating as we go. So first thing is I let that heat tool heat up for a few seconds before I put it on my project. And the reason for that is if your heat tool is not really hot, it could just blow away the powder, or at least some of the powder. Another way to combat that is to heat from underneath your project, so it's not blowing directly onto the powder and therefore won't blow any away. I don't actually commonly do this, but you could, or at least initially do this just to get that initial stick so the powder doesn't any of it blow away, and then you could heat it from the top. And I don't recommend waving it around, just because you want to actually get it hot, and waving it around sort of dilutes the heat or spreads it around so it doesn't heat as well. And there we go. And you just want to check it in the light and make sure it's all shiny. If you see any dull spots, you'll want to go back and heat it just a little bit more. Now sometimes if people get a little bit of pitting, or it doesn't look nice and crisp and clear like this, there's one of two things usually. Well, one of three things. First, either your Versamark isn't wet enough and you need to refill it, or two, your embossing powder is very old and perhaps is a little bit clumpy and not fine, so you're not getting that nice even coverage. Or three, you need to heat it just a little bit more because it will initially melt in little areas, and then as it melts, it kind of spreads out. So try those 3 tips to help improve the overall effect of your embossing. Now I'm going to do a chalkboard effect with this. Now this is just a separate technique, not really related to embossing. So I'm using my white ink pad, and I'm just going to very lightly drag over my image, and then maybe even just smear it a little bit. And that will just give it that old chalkboard look. You could use a sponge or a tissue for this. You don't have to use your finger. Or you could leave it clean, completely up to you. Now I'm just going to speed through making the rest of the card. I'm just going to make kind of a simple card. I've got 5 by 10 inch basic white, thick basic white card base, and then I've got a 4 7/8 square embossed with the exposed brick on top. And then I'm just going to use these gorgeous paper florist dies and just create a little bouquet around my chalkboard effect here. There we go. I actually really love those colors. Now I just want to add some ribbon. So I'm just deciding if I want linen thread. I think I actually really like this black and white gingham. So I'm just going to do a simple bow, just tying 2 loops together about like that. And there you go. So I just want to show you a few more samples using heat embossing. So we have this one where I have just heat embossed the words. You could stamp it across here, but I wanted to add a little bit of dimension to the project, so that was a nice way to add that. And then for this one, I wanted to stamp flowers around the cat. So by embossing clear over the cat, the ink resisted from the cat, plus it made that kitty stand out a little bit more because she's shiny and the rest of the card is not. And this one I have watercolored over top of the heat embossing, and of course the embossing powder resists the color, so the white image shows up quite nicely on that watercolored background. Same thing with this one, a watercolor resist, and then also white embossed the words so the words really stand out and are dimensional. And on this one, I used my Stampin' Blends over top of the embossing powder to give it some color. And here, this is embossing on vellum, so that gives you another really nice look, a very soft look. So I hope those tips really help you be successful with your embossing. And thanks so much for joining me. Please leave me a comment, and I'll see you next video. Bye-bye.